friends. Welcome to the COVID calls. I am your host, Ryan Pyle, and I am in Istanbul, Turkey. How's everyone doing today? Today on the show, I've got Scott Wilson. He's been on the show a few times, and every time we catch up, it just gets more fun and more funny. And of course, Scott has made a lot of television shows, and he's also a producer. And he and I are a little bit in the same boat at the moment. So we're both trying to get our production companies back up and running. And you might remember Scott was in a quite a well-known television series called Departures. And this is the third time he's joining me on my COVID calls. And I'm super grateful for his time. And every time we connect, it just is a blast. So with no further ado, I will bring in Scott into the chat, and we're going to catch up and talk television for a bit and just see what's going on. Hey, man, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. How are you doing in Canada at the moment, buddy?
Not bad. Not bad. Yeah. I mean, the weather's good, and it feels like summer, and there's good opportunity to kind of get outside and forget some of this stuff. So it's incremental, right? It's the little things that you keep doing to kind of at least temporarily forget what's going on and try to live some sort of normality. But yeah, things are starting to come back, I think, and that's the important thing. How's Turkey?
Turkey's good, but I must admit I'm very jealous watching your Instagram of you cutting up the farm with that motorcycle and doing some off-road riding because I'm stuck in a city with 18 million people, and I just celebrated my 100th day a few days ago. So it's been a long haul, but I definitely would like some kind of Canadian. Oh, happy Canada Day, by the way, to Canadians connected.
Happy belated Canada Day. That's right.
Yeah. So were you riding for Canada Day?
I was. Yeah. I got out for a bit of riding, and just with family and kind of the way it should be. The way it should be. Just taking a day off as if there hasn't been enough days off already, but a day off in a mindset way, right? So
yeah, I mean, I just this morning, the earlier today, I was talking to another friend in Malaysia, and he actually said Malaysia's done such a good job of managing the outbreak because they've got this really sophisticated contact tracing app,
mm,
and he said just because of that, the cases have gone down to almost nothing, and he's able to go back into the studio. So he does a talk show, a late night talk show, and he's also hosts a television show all about football where they recap the nightly football games and the weekly football matches and stuff. And he said he's back in the studio pretty much like normal. I mean, the camera guys are wearing masks, but he says it's almost back to normal, which is great to
yeah,
hear that is happening.
yeah.
But what are somewhere?
It's recharging. It's recharging to hear when there are others who have kind of found the way past it. It kind of inspire us to be like, yeah, there is a way through. There is a way past for sure.
Yeah. So at the moment, my situation is I am still looking to go to Europe to do some filming because I feel like that's going to be like a safe bubble to
Yeah.
operate from. And apparently, as of today or as of July 1st, I can actually go from Turkey to Europe, but I think I have to do a 14-day quarantine on arrival.
hmm
And I'm looking at that option because 14 days in Istanbul, 14 days in Europe doesn't really matter. And if I can get into Germany and then, but my guys in Canada and can come, which is great because Canadians can go to Europe now as of
Yes,
July 1st, but
that's right.
Americans not. So the
Right.
U.S. is just not getting it done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, especially for us as Canadians, we depend so heavily on the U.S. economy
Right.
and U.S. workforce for especially in the entertainment industry. So it's certainly frustrating. I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for them to be looking at such a serious uptick in cases right now when everyone else seems to be trending down. It must be extremely frustrating, and it is for all of us, because I think as a globe, when you see somebody else on the uprise, it's just sort of it's deflating, right? It's like, we're not over this yet. We're not over this yet. So
So far, there was a very, very funny article in the New York Times yesterday, saying that Canadian businesses really want the border to reopen with the United States. Because for people who are watching this, the border between Canada and the United States is closed, and this is the world's longest border, undefended border. Like there's no military on the border, and yet for the last 3 months it's basically been closed. And the article in the New York Times was saying that Canadian businesses desperately want the border to reopen so that American tourists can come back into Canada. Because for people who don't know, the US dollar is actually much higher than the Canadian dollar. So a lot of Americans come up to Canada, especially in the summertime, for tourism because they can kind of enjoy a holiday at a cheaper price than if they were to stay in the US. And of course, that business now is just closed. So the article said Canadian business is desperate for US tourists, but Canadians would still but the Canadians themselves would actually prefer to keep the border closed. But it's just crazy that this is even like something we have to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's such a every aspect of this thing is a double-edged sword, right? I mean, yes, of course, we depend so heavily on the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy. At the same time, I think most of us understand that based on what's going on down there right now and how serious it is, the prospect of opening the border, while appealing from an economic standpoint, when you think of yourself and your own family, it's sort of like, yeah, well, maybe we can just stick it out a little longer and see what happens, So
Yeah.
it's tough, and as I say, like those who depend entirely on the U.S. dollar, especially those border towns, places like Niagara Falls, which aren't all that far from here,
Yeah.
are absolutely dependent not just on the U.S. but on international travel as well. And I mean, they're looking at an absolutely devastating summer for tourism, and they're kind of begging Canadians to do more domestic travel and engage in kind of seeing your own backyard, which I've always kind of touted that as well, and kind of said see your own backyard before you go off and see the world. The world's an amazing place, but
Right.
no matter where you live, there's amazing things in your own backyard. So hopefully we Canadians will get the message and kind of support our own for this year to kind of help get by until we can get out and explore the world again.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? So look, I mean, first of all, thank you again for your time. It's always great to catch up, and this is our third call together. We've
Yeah,
done them about every 2 weeks or so, and it's been great because I think the world has kind of progressed a little bit more every time we've chatted, and it's been great. So, I mean, you're in the office today. Like, what are you actually doing in your office right now as a Canadian production company? Like, what are you planning? What are you looking to do over the next few months? Because for me, I'm definitely honed in on this Europe idea, and I've been doing a lot of planning and researching and fundraising and trying to find broadcasters to put some things together. So that's
sure.
kind of where my head is. What are you up to at the moment?
Yeah, it's pre-production stages again,
Yeah.
which is good. It's certainly making the team, giving the team that positivity again, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But it's hazier than it ever has before. There is no right answer, and I think in the past we've had a pretty clear vision of what the project was and how we would make it so. What where we would go after it, et cetera, et cetera. It was just a matter of ticking those boxes and moving forward. I think right now with pre-production, we have local business, more domestic jobs that are starting to come forward, but there's still a lot of haze to it as to how are we going to make this happen safely. When do we do it? When do we have access to whether it's certain facilities, or when do we have access to certain regions even of our own country? With Canada being such a large country, obviously it's very regionalized in the way that the lockdown has sort of opened up, and by what means. And other areas of the country that haven't had nearly the hardships that others, the more populated areas, have, are rightfully being very, very cautious of letting other Canadians into their regions and into their provinces. So as these jobs and clients come up, there are a lot of these hurdles and questions to get over, even domestically, even without leaving the country, is to say, okay, well, there's a job in Halifax, but to go there, the East Coast is not allowing out of province people without a quarantine.
Really?
So yeah,
So
that
you
in
you
work
can't
and
travel
quarantine.
freely inside Canada at all.
No, no.
Oh
I mean,
wow.
unless it's essential travel. So right now you cannot drive or they're certainly not recommending and not wanting you to drive coast to coast. Now, whether there are police at the borders anymore, that was the case in some instances during kind of the hottest times of cases that were coming up. I know the Quebec provincial police were at the border between Ottawa, like Ontario, and Quebec, preventing travel. I have a friend who has residence in New Brunswick, but also residence in Toronto, and travels back and forth in order to see his children. And he was stopped at the border between New Brunswick and Quebec, and he sort of had to present court-ordered papers saying, my daughter lives in Toronto. I'm allowed to see her, and nobody's going to stop me from seeing her, sort of thing. So yeah, it's, as I say, it's weird, and it's this all new ground for us, and for a free country. It's weird. It's weird to be prevented, and it obviously brings up a lot of potential legal questions and things like that. That goes against our Charter of Rights and blah 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 blah. So this has been the ongoing discussion. Anyway, you asked about production here in our office, and
Right.
these are the sort of things. These are the sort of discussions that end up kind of sidelining us because we have to kind of figure these things out, and that's not even leaving the country. And so when those job prospects are coming up, as they are now too, we're looking at some potential European. We're looking at a possible Russian production.
When?
All the more of those same
Yeah.
questions come up. So it's not just putting together a TV production, which, as you know, is a huge ask in and of itself,
Yeah.
especially with a small team. And I'm sure, like you, do things in smaller, tight knit groups, and not with a corporate conglomerate that can assign a million tasks to a million people. But now with all of these sort of COVID problems, it becomes even more of a headache.
Does Canada have a contact tracing app that they forced everyone to download and use?
No, they have announced that they are either working on that, or they've selected one, and the last I read is that they won't impose it. It won't be mandatory, but they are hoping that as many people will accept it as they can. I'm for it. For what it's worth, I think it's a great idea. I think the contact tracing. I mean, I know that some people get uptight about the idea of privacy invasion and things like that, but I don't know. I just feel like the greater good of getting our economy and our lives back in order, and for people's safety, especially those who are greatly at risk, the elderly, etc. It just makes perfect sense. And if somebody knows that I was searching the best price for dog food at the same time, I don't care. Fine, you can know that about me.
Yeah, I mean it's all about the greater good, right? And
Yeah.
it's funny, like because I'm supposed to be filming in Switzerland in August, and they have a contact tracing app, and then they also have a WhatsApp group that they send out WhatsApp information every day about current information. But the contact tracing app is mandatory for anyone that wants to come into Switzerland. So it's in English, German, and French, and I just downloaded it today to just kind of have a look to see what's going on. And my buddy Mark that I spoke to in Malaysia, this is really interesting. They was mandatory. They had to download the contact tracing app, and each store that you go into has a QR code, and you have to scan it before you can go in. So when you go to a shopping mall, every single store in the shopping mall has its own QR code. If you want to go into like a Tim Hortons or Starbucks, you have to scan the QR code. So this thing knows where you are literally at every moment, and then it can trace back to time of day and when, and if you came into contact with someone. And it's
amazing.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, what's going on? But I mean,
we live in an age where this technology is available to us, so let's use it to our benefit. Let's put it to work. I mean, this is precisely the kind of reason that I think people who made those miraculous inventions in technology and the amount of research that went into this kind of stuff, these are the applications where they should absolutely be used. So thank God we live in a time and an age where this kind of thing is available to us. So let's use it. I mean, until like, yes, it's not the most ideal way to live, but I think it's better. I think we can all agree it's better than the lockdown we've almost entirely as a world had to face. And until there's a vaccine, I don't know a better way, and I don't think any of us do. So
no, I mean, and I don't know how much longer I can. Like we're both running companies. Like, how much longer can you just sit around and not have money come in? I'm
That's right.
curious. I'm curious, like with your broadcast conversations and your partner conversations, like, are they like, are you guys having like really good conversations? Are people like still receptive to doing film and television work at the moment in Canada, or you mentioned kind of hazy with regards to access and insurance and all these kinds of
Mhm.
things. But I mean, are you able to actually do any real planning, or is it just everything is just conceptual at the moment?
It seems like every week we can move the ball forward a little further.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, there still are a lot of big question marks, and so ultimately, every week it seems like the conversation can only go so far, and then it breaks down. It's like, okay, so we figured this out and this out, but the insurance thing, or when, or how do we get access to here, or and those question marks that no one can answer still remain as a roadblock, or still remain as a hurdle. And so it seems like, again, you're working your way down this sheet of boxes to tick,
Mm.
and ultimately you can only get so far, and you hope that next week one more of those boxes can get ticked. And that's the thing. I think the last time we spoke, we were talking about the same thing. Is you sort of look up the chain of command, or look up you know to some higher power above you, whether it's at the network, or whatnot, that can answer these questions for you. Will you green light this? Can we go ahead? Can we film this? They're looking for the same answers we are, and nobody has the answer, and that's what's really frustrating and has us all kind of swimming around a bit lost right now, is because no one has those answers, and only time will reveal them. So I mean, that as a side note, the Canadian TV industry has been a bit of a mess for the last probably 10 years.
Oh, really?
So it's always been kind of um, I don't know, suffering from a lot of places have been suffering from a bit of an identity crisis, and who we are as a TV station, what our brand is, and trying to reinvent themselves all the time. And we've had equal, if not greater, success going outside of the Canadian borders to get commissioning broadcasters on board. And so I don't think that's really changed. However, those broadcasters are still kind of asking the same questions, and if they are outside of Canada, then again, ultimately, it probably makes it even muddier, because they know that we're in a different place than they are, and our rules are different than their rules. If we go there, what do we have to abide by when we come home? What do we have to abide by? It's a big mess. So instead of just saying, well, let's sit on our butts and wait for it all to clear up, we just get together and look at what we can do, and to continue to move the ball forward on several projects and several irons in the fire, so to speak, at once, hoping
Mm.
that one of them will gain some sort of clarity and solidification before the next one, and we'll go with that.
Yeah, I had a call with my crew last night when we do these Wednesday calls where we just
Yeah,
kind of talk it out,
yeah,
I mean, we all have to be comfortable if we're going to go back to work, and I just basically said, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but my feeling is like this is probably going to be a problem for a while,
yes,
and we're probably going to have to work through it at some stage, whether we start up in August or whether we start up next year in January. Like, this is still going to be a thing. So
yeah,
I'd kind of rather just start working now and getting used to the personal protective equipment and the social distancing, and
that's right,
doing all the interviews outside and whatever we can do to keep it safe.
that's right,
And just trying to find whatever that new normal is sooner rather than later, instead
yeah,
of just being like, 2020, forget it. Let's reconnect in January, because
yeah.
that, to me, that's heartbreaking. Like,
It is. It
yeah,
is. And even from a personal perspective, not just the professional, but I was speaking with a friend yesterday on Canada Day who texted me, and a year ago, that yesterday, had a barbecue, had some friends over to my place, and it was a very different reality, obviously, this year. And he said, what a difference a year makes. And we were both kind of reminiscing about those good times, and hoping that next year on Canada Day it can be a lot different and a lot better. And it was mildly depressing to again, from a personal standpoint, be writing off the rest of 2020 and just looking forward to the summer of 2021. And as Canadians, oftentimes as we go into the winter, we just start looking all the way ahead to say, okay, well, it's November 15th, but you're like, well, for me, especially as a motorcyclist, you put the
yeah,
bike away at that point,
that's
and you start
heartbreaking.
counting the weeks and the days and the
Yeah.
months until you can kind of get back out again until it's springtime again, kind of beginning of April. And I've never been looking at, basically counting the winter days sitting right now in July, and that's that's really disheartening is to be looking ahead. So from to your point, from a professional standpoint,
Yeah.
not only are we trying to just pay the bills by getting the corporate commercial stuff more locally that we know we can get, but for the where the real passion burns in international travel, we're we're doing what we can, looking at next year, assuming that we'll be out of the woods by then. And in the meantime, yeah, there are things that we are doing in hopes that, as I say, every week something else sort of gets lifted, something else kind of comes to the light of day, that we can potentially still salvage international travel out of this year as well.
Yeah.
And case in point is like yesterday. As of yesterday, Canadians are cleared and allowed to visit Europe again. And how many of those people will want to just go as an average tourist? Not many, I'm sure, a fraction of what normally would. But it's just I think it's a positive sign, and especially for people like ourselves in the industry that we're in, it's a really good sign that we can start to again get back to work, get back to normality, and so we just keep going one step at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I think Europe reopening is a positive step, and like I said, it's the same that I said to my film guys. Like, we're all going to have to try and get used to living with this,
Yes.
and that includes, you know, traveling around or driving to another country or something. And I just feel like, you know, just being paralyzed and going into hibernation for another 6 months is soul destroying,
Yeah.
and it really, it doesn't help. I don't know if it helps us. I mean, if we can all just kind of like figure out how to if we can figure out how to social distance and keep ourselves clean, you know, I think for the majority of us will probably be okay, and that's really all we can ask for. But yeah, I'm actually terrified of the 4th of July, 2 days from now, down south, because I just keep
Yeah.
seeing pictures of people in like Texas and in Florida, like at the beach and sitting
Yeah.
in restaurants and going to bars, and I'm just like,
Yes.
guys, come on, take it more seriously. Like, the whole
Yes.
world is closed down. Like, America is not a bubble where bad things don't happen. It's
Hmm.
and my dad's in the U.S. He lives just outside Los Angeles, and
Well.
he's beside himself. Like,
Yeah.
as a good conservative Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah. It's 2 weeks from the 4th of July will really be an indicator of how bad or how good people were able to kind of rally and use common sense to be
Yeah,
safe for a little while, for the greater good of everyone.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll hope for the best, obviously, and hope that we can kind of move on. I mean, for you though, Ryan, the idea with going to Europe, because you have kind of more freedom of travel, I guess, more options of where you can go and what you can do.
And a
Um,
diverse landscapes,
yeah.
languages, cultures. That was my hope.
So is the idea to start to look at new ideas, new projects, or to try to continue on with existing ones, but within European?
Bit of both. Bit of
Okay.
both. So I've got my Extreme Trek series, which I normally
Yes.
film globally around the world, and you know, I've got my episode in Myanmar from earlier this year, and I've probably got to have an episode from Ethiopia, and I've just tried to reposition the whole rest of this season to be in Europe, and
Okay.
just trying to find landscapes and places that just look so different from each other,
Yeah.
to try to bring the audience that same kind of wow factor that show kind of delivers. Just because I can't get on a plane and go to Brazil, or Indonesia, or, you know, New Zealand,
Yeah.
because everything's closed, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of my big hope. And then of course the show is great because the show is all about social distancing. Like, we're walking, we're trekking, we're camping. So we're really kind of out in the wild. And then when we come back into the cities, we'll obviously be as careful as we can.
Yeah.
You know, try to avoid bars and restaurants and try to stay as clean as we can before we can get to the next place. And the idea is that we would drive and just rent vans and kind of be as isolated from everything as possible, but still be
Right.
able to do something. And then I kind of developed a new show, as well. And I've been trying to get some people on board for that, and hopefully we can film that new show idea also in Europe around the trekking and adventure show. So that's kind of, it's definitely an emergency, like plan B. I think
Yes.
is what it is. I mean, it's not the best thing in the world to try to have to put together in like 6 weeks or or 8 weeks. It's definitely been a stretch, but there are people out there that appreciate the effort that I'm putting into it, and there are people out there who feel like we'll be able to get done what we need to get done. And
Yeah.
then of course it's like getting my crew over. One of them is in the United States, and I think it's just gonna probably still get worse. I mean, if
Yeah.
people's attitudes maybe don't change, and then I don't even know if he'll ever be able to come out of the United States. And then my other camera operator in Canada, obviously now they can travel to Europe, so that looks like it's positive. And
Yes.
it's just a scramble, man.
It is.
I, we've talked about scheduling, we've talked about how long it takes. Like, the average production schedule is like 12 to 18 months, where you're doing pre-production, and then you're in production, and then you're post-production, and then you're broadcasting. And now everything is either like way too long, or you're scrambling to put something together and it's just way too tight, and
Yeah.
everything just feels like it's a whirlwind.
It is. Yeah.
And I don't know where to go. Like, I can't sit around anymore. And I know the situation is terrible. Um, but I do think, like, you can still film in this environment. You can still work if you can wear what needs to be worn, and keep your distance from people.
And keeping busy for everyone, regardless of your industry, I think is just, it's good for the soul. It's good for the mental health. I
Yeah,
think we all need to be looking at what we can do to move forward in whatever aspect it is.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I think rather than sit and wallow, you're right. It's better to not write off 2020, but to say, well, what can we still do? What can we try at least?
yeah. Just try.
And that's the kind of the same mentality that we're in, is what can we do? What can we try? What can we even tinker with here domestically,
Yeah,
and try to put ideas together and do them. And it's also given us kind of some time to be creative and try things, filming things, that practices, techniques, things like that we just wanted to play around and right here again in our own backyard, to kind of try things out and do things that we can then implement when we're going out on the road and doing production again and stuff. So it's whatever we can do, whatever we can do to feel like we're we're moving forward.
well,
And
one of the
we are. It's just very slow.
yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm terrified about, and I don't know how you've structured your business, but I have a few full-time staff, and they've been great, and they've agreed to work, at a reduced rate, so that we can keep everything going.
Yeah.
And then I work with freelancers, and I have freelance editors, freelance music composers. My two camera operators who travel with me always are freelance, essentially, because they work on other projects sometimes when they're not with me. And I'm terrified of now losing them, because
Yes.
like, I've been doing this for 10 years, you've been doing this for almost 20 now. Like, these people are our family, and everything that you and I put our names on, is like this beautiful, like, symphony orchestra of really talented people doing
Yeah.
what they're great at. And I'm so afraid that these people are just going to give up on production, get other jobs, uh,
Out
you
of
know
necessity.
yeah, because they have to feed their families and pay their rent, and right now I'm not able to give them anything,
Yeah.
and no one's really doing anything. I mean, we're both sitting at home planning for something that may or may not ever happen. Like, and I'm just terrified that I'm going to lose the people that have helped me so much build what I have, but also who are just incredibly talented people and shouldn't be doing anything else. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a huge exodus from film and television because of this.
Yeah.
Just because it's so hard,
Yeah.
even when it's good.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a year, consider it a year, and we don't even know, but a year out of work for anyone
Mm.
is just, it's a breaking point. It's beyond a breaking point. And so, yeah, I mean, we suffer. I suffer the the same nightmares at night as well, because again, we have an incredible team, a very small, tight knit group of people who are for the most part are freelancers,
Yeah.
and they need to put food on their table, and if that can't be done by the normal means of what we do, then yeah, they're going to go elsewhere. And so yeah, we suffer the same thing. I would hate to break up the band, as it were, because it works so well, and the team works so well together. So all the more reason to, again, keep chipping away at things, keep trying to move the ball forward, and find solutions, because one of these days we'll wake up and have one of these phone calls, and it will be the here's the final answer, here's the final box to get ticked, we're moving forward, here's the green light, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There always is. It's just how far away it is. It might feel like the pinprick right now, but it's there, and moving forward, it's never one step back, never one step back.
Yeah, no, it's so one of my post production team has been building homes and working on construction, because it's an industry that's still moving forward, and it's increasing, and it's outdoors, and people are pretty much social distancing. And I was chatting with him the other day. He loves it, and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to come back to editing travel shows because people can't travel, and
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking, but it makes total sense. Like, why would you pin the hopes on your mortgage and your family's health and well-being on an industry that we all love but may not love moving forward,
yeah,
or it might just be so difficult moving forward that it's not worth it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I know. And
yeah,
then, you know, after all this is said and done, um, you know, I often feel silly thinking about, how am I going to make my TV travel show when,
mm,
we all know, we've all been to places that, are far worse off, and
oh
making a travel show is really not the be all end all. There are a lot more important things to be focusing on with
yeah,
what's going on right now. But all we can speak to is what we know, and what our jobs are, what our careers are. But
our own little world. We're not
yeah,
politicians. we're
exactly. Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not we're
Certainly,
not
there
in a
are a lot of
position to save
people.
the world.
There are a lot of people far worse off, and
Yeah,
as I say, sometimes I feel silly, blathering on about how important it is for me to get back on the road and travel, and make TV. But that's yeah, you said, that's my world, that's my bubble, that's what I know. I certainly understand that there are people worse off than my situation, and can appreciate that. But I just need to focus on keep doing what I'm doing anyway.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we have to keep our own little. We can worry about all the people who have lost their jobs and lost their well-beings in all the countries around the world, and obviously that's heartbreaking.
Mhm.
But it's hard for us to be able to speak to that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
all we can do today is acknowledge that there are a lot of people in a lot worse situations,
Sure,
and then we can just kind of catch up like two friends that are trying to keep our businesses afloat,
that's
and
right.
keep our own people together, because that's
And the truth of the matter is that before COVID-19 situation happened, there were a
yeah,
lot of people in more dire situations than ourselves as well.
yeah.
It's just the way that's just the way of the world. So
Yeah. I mean, have you? So I read in the news, and maybe you can speak to this as well. I read in the news that American productions are now allowed to come into Canada. Like, they've been given a special
mhm.
pass to get over the border, even though the border is officially closed. But it's
Yes,
because the Canadian television and film production business is so big, and there's so many big American productions that come up to film in Canada,
yeah.
that actually the Canadian government has made some exception for this, and has even like backstopped an insurance scheme so that people can still do insurance. Is that all like true? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not the authority on that, and I wouldn't want to speak
Sure.
to it as the golden word. But yeah, I've read and heard the same thing. And as I understand, again, it's regional, so it depends on the province, and in some cases, it depends on the municipality as well, and how that gets taken care of. Where everyone basically is kind of. Um, like pod isolated. It's one hotel. Everyone stays there. They don't go out. They go to work and they come back. And I guess if it means getting work or not getting work, then people are gonna do that. And it certainly is, a sign of light for the Canadian TV industry to have that coming back.
Yeah.
Like we talked about with American tourists coming back over, and the need for that a Canadian tourism dollar to help our economy out. At the same time, it's at what cost? The big, very Canadian example I can give as well is with sports and
What's
with
going on with sports these days?
well, here in Canada, they've just been talking about how for NHL, like professional ice hockey, that there is going to be two hub cities announced to do a brand new 24 game playoff breakdown, 24 team playoff breakdown. And I don't know that it's officially been said, but everyone is kind of speculating that it's Toronto and Edmonton as these two hub cities. And so, again, is that the right decision? Is sports that important that we need to, potentially risk? They had announced that I think it was 20 some odd NHL players have tested positive for COVID-19. So, is that a necessity right now? What is TV a necessity right now? It all depends on your perspective and what you do and where you make your money, and so it'll be interesting to see how that. Obviously, it will play out in these arenas, keeping everyone together without traveling around in an attempt to keep people safe and kind of more or less quarantined. But they'll be playing in front of empty seats, and
That's crazy.
it'll just be weird. Yeah, it'll just be
Yeah.
really weird.
Did you see they? I don't know if you saw this, and it's on a little bit of a lighter note, but they started up like the Japanese baseball league or the Korean baseball league a few weeks back, and they obviously there was no one in the stands, but someone was putting sex dolls in the stands, and so
Yeah, and cardboard cutouts of people and stuff like that. Yeah,
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 yeah. Anyways, that's something to think about, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And I
right.
wonder if I'd be interested to hear what the player's perspective on that is. If you're playing out there, does it help give you that, in your periphery? Does it help make it feel like you're in front of an audience, or is it just, you have a look up there and you feel a bit silly that you're out playing in front of sex dolls and cardboard cutouts?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell. I mean, I played basketball for the University of Toronto when I was growing up, and I can tell you, playing in front of a crowd is the best thing in the world.
Sure.
And I mean, obviously, a professional athlete with 20 or 30,000 people, it must be just insane. But
Yeah.
I remember going. I don't know if you have you ever been to Laval, Quebec?
Yeah.
There,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a little university there. So we used to go up there. This is a total tangent, but we used to go up there and play University of Toronto versus Laval, and they had the craziest fans because
Right.
you could drink at their events, and it's such a small school, and it's such a remote part of Quebec that the whole school would go to the games, and
Right.
they would just get on us. So they were so nasty and violent,
Yeah.
and I mean that was just one of the hardest places to play
Yeah.
for us ever, but it was also the most fun because as a team you get jacked up by the angry crowd, right? And the
Yeah.
better you do, the more they hate you, and you just want to give it to them. And if there's no crowd and there's no home team,
Yeah.
what's going on? Like,
Yeah. It doesn't feel like there's nearly as much at stake, right? So.
yeah, right. Like,
Mhm.
how do you elevate your play when you're not playing for
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know those kids that go to those games and their lives are changed, and then they want
You
to.
continually hear time after time for any professional athlete, regardless of what they're playing,
Yeah,
feeding off that energy, that energy of the crowd. And so without that, whether it's track and field, whether it's, hockey, whether it's basketball, football, whatever, I don't know. It must be a bizarre thing to have to deal with. It must constantly feel like you're just in a scrimmage or a practice or something.
right. Yeah, no, that's insane. So has the Canadian government come out and said like when they're going to allow domestic travel to be free again? Is there
No,
any?
they've been very careful, saying that everything's going to be very politically correct or very political in their speeches. Like, this is what we're going to do. We'll keep checking. It's going to come very soon. Everything will be done in a very safe and gradual way,
Yeah,
so as not to make mistakes that others have made and things like that. So.
sure. It's just it's strange to me. I was speaking to one of my old professors at the University of Toronto, and he taught international politics, and and we were talking about a week ago about international institutions, like, and again, this has nothing to do with television production, but we were just talking about how, like, things like setting up the WHO,
Hmm.
the World Health Organization, is kind of for this exact kind of event that we're dealing with now. But for some reason, all the countries are doing their own things. No one's really listening to the WHO. Everyone's kind of going off in their own direction, trying to solve the problem themselves, and there's no real like global leadership in this issue. And you've just seen every country just look inward instead of having like a global leader. And these are institutions that we've been paying tax to fund for decades, right? Like that, and we were just having this conversation together, and we were just like, why? Like, why? If we're all just going to go our own way and do our own thing, why do we even need international institutions? And it was an interesting argument to just kind of go back and forth on, and we both didn't have an answer, but we talked about it for a while and just thought like maybe if we had a global leadership that actually would be an authority on information, we'd be further ahead than we are now.
Which I suppose is either what the goal was or what it's become is, as you say, here's the best information we have from a worldwide source. Do with it what you will, because I mean, each region is or has experienced this in completely different ways, and I get that, and completely different laws, completely different values, and all of that sort of stuff have really complicated being able to have an international voice saying, strictly from a science and health perspective, this is what you should be doing. And how people have, depending on the government, depending on the politics of every region, every country, have obviously handled it differently. And some of it, I'm sure, you look at some cases that, New Zealand or Iceland, I mean, they're small countries, they're very remote countries. So geographically, they're benefiting hugely. And it's easy to just shut the door and prevent, inward flow of potential disease. So that's an obvious one. There are other countries that are sort of like, wow, how did they do that? They just seem to manage it better, despite not being locked down, et cetera, et cetera. And some of there's just no answer for, and some of it might just be luck of the draw as much as we would like to, say, well, it's because they did this or they didn't do that or whatever it is. It's a weird one.
It is. And you know what, like, and I know New Zealand is a country that you hold dear to your heart because that's kind of how you started your television career, by doing that trip to New Zealand, and you got to see a lot of the country, and I know you've been back, I think, since then.
Sure.
And I can tell you now, and I was talking to one of my post-production guys that's based in New Zealand, and he was telling me that like 30% of the country's GDP in New Zealand comes from international tourists, or 35%. And then another like 30% comes from international film and television production.
Wow. Yeah.
So like totally devastated as an economy, but they manage the virus well. But holy cow, like, and the government is trying to give people subsidies and stuff like that. But for how long? Like,
at what cost?
At what cost? It's terrifying. And he was like, he's really happy that he can go and see his parents again, and he's really happy he can go out to a restaurant again. But no one has any money, because no one wants to spend any money, because no one knows when they're going to be able to work again.
To make it, yeah.
It's like we're all just hiding.
And that's what I mean. There's no right answer, and it's very easy to say, oh well, now, with the hindsight being 2020, it's easy to look back and say, well, if we had done this, or we didn't need to do that, or well, I think for the most, there was a lot of things that could have been done perhaps earlier. At least, again, I'm looking at what happened here, but on the greater scale, at the 40,000 foot level, nobody has the answers. Again, is the question, or is the real crux of this whole thing. Nobody has most of these answers, and we're all trying to figure it out as we go. So, for the most part, I think we're moving forward with the best information we can.
Yeah, no, it's true. And my friend Mark, that I was speaking with today in Singapore earlier, before I chatted with you, he was telling me that the fines in Malaysia, sorry, not Singapore, he's in Malaysia. The fines in Malaysia are huge for not wearing a mask in the street, or for not wearing a mask on public transport, like thousands of dollars. And he said that's what motivates people to do what the government says, whether you think it's right or wrong. I don't know if it
gets results.
It gets results, right? Yeah. So I mean, it's just crazy.
I know. Yeah.
But
Well,
so
even the city, like from a municipality standpoint, the city of Toronto, Canada's largest city population-wise, yesterday or the day prior announced that masks would be mandatory for any indoor setting or situation,
you know,
which is pretty major. And we'll see how it goes down, and more importantly, how it's enforced as well. I think is what will be interesting. Um, so yeah,
yeah, yeah. In Turkey, in Istanbul, where I am right now, so you have to wear a mask on the street. You don't have to wear a mask, but you have to like cover. So, like I said, I told you I've got one of those buffs, and it's quite nice, and I can breathe through the buff. It's a
right,
little bit better. But then when you go indoors, you have to wear a mask. So
right,
that's it's yeah, I mean it's good now, I guess, to see everyone on the street wearing a mask because I feel like
yeah,
maybe I feel safer. But
yeah.
at the same time, it's like 2020 hindsight. Like, why wasn't everyone just mandatory or made to wear a mask 3 months ago?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it seems, as I say, it's easy to question everything now, but it does it does give pause to why there was so much misinformation
Yeah,
of you should, no, you shouldn't, no, you should, no, you shouldn't, and
yeah.
here we are.
So here's a question for you. At
Please,
what stage are you going to go back? Okay, first, I had the animated Departures season 4 idea for you, and you can have
yes,
that if you want. I really think,
thank you.
I
Yeah,
really think that, doing another 40 episodes might be a bit challenging in the next couple of years, but you should definitely do an animated season 4 because I'm watching all the comments come up here, and everyone wants you guys to do a season 4. So
yes,
you should do an animated one. But
yeah.
at what stage do you go back to OLN or one of your other partners and recut Departures and make it like a greatest hits or something just to have content in the market? Like if you were to do 5 hours of the best of Departures, is that something you think you could even sell right now? Because I'm thinking about pitching like greatest hits, extreme treks, and getting that up on BBC just
Sure.
so I can get my editors back to work and get
Yeah.
something coming through the door. Because a lot
Yes.
of the big a lot of the big production companies, they were switching into like they're switching into doing some documentaries, like archival footage documentaries, and just to keep the lights on. And
Right.
I'm wondering if you've ever thought about that because I'm definitely thinking about it.
It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 6 months.
Okay.
Because again, this was probably part of our previous conversations, but as conventional TV networks as well as SVODs and streaming platforms like Amazon and like Netflix, et cetera, are all running out of content very fast. Nobody expected to be consuming, TV around the clock for 3 months straight.
Yeah.
And so everything that was out there is consumed. And then adding to that vacuum is the fact that nobody was creating anything new during that time. So yes, there's going to be a void of content, and I think it's already there. The last conversations that we or our distribution team had with Netflix was them admitting that they knew that, but that they weren't yet ready to start buying. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they're going to spend, how they're going to spend it. In regards to animated Departure season 4, you will definitely get an EP credit on that, so don't worry
Thank
about
you. Thank
that.
you. That'd be great.
Yes, even with repackaging, retooling, or revisiting Departures. On a serious note, the revisiting of Departures is always a reality, and I
Yeah.
don't want anyone to think that we've turned our back on it and that we won't ever do it or that we don't want to do it. It's a
People
real
people are
conversation.
people are brutal with you on this. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
reading all the people like people you're a cult hero in the travel world, and these people need you to make a season 4. And I'm trying not to go into it too much, but everyone is like, give us season 4, give us
yes,
season 4.
yes. And what I mean, and I've said this a bunch of times, is that in order to make it so, we need a network to get on board. It's
Yeah.
an expensive thing. It's a complicated thing to do. So it's not just something you fund yourself at this
No,
stage. It's not
no way.
something that we can just fund ourselves and go film another episode or another season and put together. We need somebody on board. Um, there's also been the talk of just do the YouTube thing, do it through YouTube. And again, it's a cash flow issue. Is that YouTube pays pennies on the view, and even then, that money comes much later to fundraise it. There's been the crowdfund option, which we have considered to do it the crowdfund way. Um, the I kind of ragged a little bit on the Canadian TV industry earlier, in that, especially from our perspective, um, trying to make travel TV content in Canada has become extremely difficult. Everyone says no, they're not interested, and the funny thing is any of our fan base or any of the people that we have connections with uh,
Yeah.
would 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 definitely speak up and say otherwise, that they would love to see more travel TV content out there and new stuff. So trying to get the message from the fan base, from the population to those networks to say, instead of just, making So You Think You Can Dance Canada 17, let's maybe just take a fraction of that budget and
Yeah.
sprinkle it elsewhere,
Mm.
and utilize it elsewhere. So that's the message we've been trying to beat down the throats of and through the ears of these TV networks here in Canada. It's been a tough slog. The Canadian TV industry is just, it seems lost and a bit of a wash. The good thing is that it reinvents itself all the time. It seems to be, the History Network tries to do things about monsters, and then the next week they're doing things about something else entirely, whatever it may be. Sorry,
I've got a story.
please.
Sorry to interrupt you. I went into a Canadian broadcaster. I don't want to. No, I'll say it. It was Travel and Escape, or
Yes.
Travel and Escape. So I went into
Yep.
Travel and Escape with Extreme Treks, and I said, I'm a proud Canadian. I've lived abroad for 20 years. Um, and I've traveled the world. I've made some nice television shows. They're on BBC and Amazon Prime and everything like that. But no one in Canada has ever seen my shows. Like, that's just it, and I would love it, and I would love it. So I brought them Extreme Treks, which is a really nice, pretty high quality made travel show. And when I went in there, they were just rebranding Travel and Escape to be Paranormal.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That was a real conversation. So like
Yeah.
when people think about like making travel television is fun and glamorous, but you actually have to have these conversations. And they weren't going to change the name. They were still going to make it Travel and Escape. But I don't. This was like maybe 3 years ago. And
And
then
this is
at
what I'm
that,
saying about the identity crisis, that
yeah,
and it's not just Canadian TV. It's also very evident in the U.S. as well, but especially in Canada, because they're tighter with their money. The budgets are much smaller than they are in the U.S. And they look to the U.S. for whatever was successful down there, and they just repackage that. That's where most of their money goes to. They look at the safe bets.
yeah,
Um, all the specialty satellite and cable networks like OLN and things like that, Travel and Escape, that came out in the 90s, they started to suffer badly, and now they're ghost towns, and there's no money to get new content, which then brings in no new viewers. So the viewership's down. They can't attract any advertisers because there's no one watching the channel, because
yeah,
there's no good, like, it's a chicken and egg and chicken and egg and chicken and egg kind of situation.
yeah.
It's cyclical. Um, and so they just sort of sit there on life support, and it's tough. And then those big networks complain that their hands are being forced by the CRTC to make Canadian content, and I just sit back and shake my head and say, well, if you put them, again, even only a fraction of that money into making good, high quality Canadian programming that people want to see, you will
Yeah.
attract more viewers, which will then attract more advertisers, et cetera, et cetera. So
And every time you have the conversation at the network, it's with a different person because that
it
person's been
is.
fired or quit. So like,
It
there's
is.
no constant communication at
No.
all. Like
And
even
yet the
my,
weird thing is,
yeah,
it's somewhat of an incestuous industry too, because if someone leaves one place, it's just, only a matter of weeks or months before they then resurface at another network or in a different position. You see the same, especially after 20 years, you start to see the same names pop up here, there, and everywhere else. And for the most part, that's a good thing. You form, I like to think that we have really good relationships with many people, and those are the ones that we keep fostering and want to keep working with.
yeah,
Um, but as a whole, with the Canadian TV industry, what makes making more departures very difficult, is that when we started departures, it was very much lightning in a bottle. We were doing something that people wanted. We approached the right network that was being run by the right people that had money to spend, on that kind of type of product. They were seeing results from making travel TV programming. It worked. It was lightning in a bottle, and it did very well. 10 years on, it's a very, very, very different industry, unfortunately. And so in order to get a lot of those projects off the ground, you have to find funding in Europe, in the US, in the UK, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a challenge. And even then, oftentimes, as you probably know, in order to get the rubber stamp or the green light, your wonderful idea, the baby of a travel TV show that you've birthed, wants to get slapped in the face and changed and morphed and everything in order to get that green light. The network says, well, what if you just did this? Or what if we love your extreme treks, but what if instead of trekking you just sat and ate food somewhere? You're like, well, that's not at all the idea. So
No.
you have to kind of judge your integrity and the integrity of the idea and say, no, I'm sorry, like we're just not going to make a Departure season 4 unless it's exactly the way we want to make it. It's going to have to be better than season 3, bigger, and with more production value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to, the whole idea with us walking away after 3 seasons, we were offered more at the time and we walked away because it was better to burn up than fade away. We didn't want people saying it was great, but after season 4, it was kind of, and we needed fresh, creative, inspiring outlets for what we do. And I would much rather make sure that we're constantly doing fun, engaging, exciting, creative, inspiring stuff all the time. And that's why we continue to then just roll with the punches, come up with new ideas, and if they stick to the wall and get greenlit, great, we go with that. And that's where our other shows have come from. So Departures season 4 is not dead, and I truly hope it will come to fruition sooner rather than later. And it may. It very well may.
Yeah. So someone here had a great comment. Smoke My Meat said, I just checked the OLN schedule. I hope everyone likes Storage Wars. Yes. Yeah. So no, I mean, you and I are right on the same boat. Like, by the way, we only have about 2 minutes left. The desire to make aspirational television, the desire to make television where people feel like the world is a decent place again, I think, and that they want to get out and see and learn something, I just feel is so valuable and so important.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think we have to give people credit. They know what they want. They consume TV all the time and watching videos all the time. They can smell BS, and what we always want to do is give them authenticity. And if we give them authentic programming, I think people appreciate that. They don't want to see or smell BS, like, oh, this is clearly fake, or you didn't actually meet that person, or whatever else. Give them a real adventure. Give them a real experience.
And you have the product that is tested and tried and time value. I mean, you did Departures. I mean, that is still one of the most popular television shows on the planet. Like, why wouldn't people just let you make more? You don't need a hook. It's you. Like, that's the hook.
Yeah. And Justin, a lot of Justin.
Of course. But I'm just suggesting that the concept is proven.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Sooner or later, you're okay though. I mean, I'm okay. I'm kind of okay. Not always, but working on it.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. Like I
as
say,
always,
with all honesty, I think it should just be a matter of time. And if you've got good ideas you want to bounce off of us or likewise, let's just keep making. I mean, I think we're very like-minded in the kind of content that we like to make. So if in order to make it happen, we work together, then that sounds good too.
That'd be great, man. I'd appreciate that. I'll get back to you offline, not publicly about that.
You don't want to tell. Just
no. I have so many good ideas. Yeah. We need all these people who are listening to sign a non-disclosure agreement so we can share our television ideas. That would be hilarious.
Yeah. Go or no go. Everyone can just give thumbs up or thumbs down.
Thumbs up. All right, buddy. Look, we're almost out of time. Thank you so much for your time. It's always good to catch up. I don't know how about you, but after these, I feel so much better to be able to talk to another, television presenter and producer. And good luck with everything over there. And I wish you well. And I hope the next time I write you to ask you to do another one of these, you say no because you're filming.
like, yeah, I hope I don't hear from you that you're just too damn busy to say I need to chat with you again. And as I say,
Perfect.
the next time we meet, maybe in Europe, crossing over somewhere or something, and we'll sit 6 feet apart, having a beer, and knowing that we're on the other side of this now.
Perfect, buddy. We got 5 seconds. Four,
Take care.
3, 2, 1. Bye bye.